So Sixero was suggesting that he believes Nashville won the day. Who do you think won the day?
Oh, gosh, I'm all for the best player available. Mark Stone, to me, has shifted the weight towards Vegas. I know you guys were talking earlier about what we talked about to end our marathon day. Is ultimately you can say anything you want about what team is has the depth, but it'll come down to your goaltending. And as much as we believe that San Jose and the rest of the teams have gotten a lot better in the last few months, it's really going to come down to the guy between the pipes.
Looking at Kevin Hayes, Kipper for the Jets, what kind of a guy is Winnipeg getting here? How much of a difference do you think he can make?
Well, at 6'5", he's a physical presence. And we believe that he can make plays out there, and he's a guy that can pass first and shoot second, which kind of can bode well for a guy like Patrick Laine or a couple of the other wingers. But I think this guy will come in and make a difference. And we are talking about still a conference that's known for being heavy, fast. Vegas showed that throughout their playoff run last year, and teams are taking that and looking at the same type of blueprint. So I think Hayes comes in there, and yes, they were right in there with the Stone talk, but ultimately when you talk about purely needing a positional player, in many ways Hayes is I wouldn't say a better fit than Stone because of the pedigree of what Mark Stone brings you, but he's exactly what Winnipeg needed.
It's amazing when you look at that because Hayes goes to the Western Conference, Simmons goes to the Western Conference, Stone. Like, it seems to me like the playoffs in the West is just going to be a war, Nick. Like, they're all heavy.
Well, yeah, and we saw the San Jose go get a guy like Haley. And then Matt Hendricks comes into play as well in terms of bringing some sandpaper to the Winnipeg Jets. So everybody understands where the style of play is, and that's, of course, speed, being able to score off the rush. But there's also an element of toughness that I think for the most part is pretty prominent now in the Western Conference. We see the way Tom Wilson plays for the Washington Capitals in the East and how that played out ultimately to help them win the Stanley Cup. And then we see Columbus go get a guy like McQuaid. And McQuaid certainly, isn't the first name that we thought about the last few days at trade deadline. But make no mistake, man, that McQuaid is set up for another visit against the Washington Capitals and Tom Wilson. I'd love to see Columbus play Washington again.
Could happen.
Oh, yeah.
Kipper, the Leafs make a fourth-line move today. Flames pick up a blue liner. Relatively quiet, though, both organizations. Were you expecting more from one of the two or both?
What are you saying? Nick Petan is not going to go up against Tom Wilson?
I love me some Nick Petan. But
yeah, I think for Leaf fans, maybe a little disappointment today in terms of not addressing that they could add some more grit. But we listened to Kyle Dubas, and he's got a vision and a plan for the hockey club, and that doesn't necessarily coincide with how Toronto Maple Leaf fans feel about how tough they are. And they go and make a trade to add some more skill into their organization. So in many ways, you traded Lindholm for Trevor Moore, who will be in the lineup and we believe will stay in the lineup. And I like Trevor Moore. I've said it right from the get-go. He alone will add some more sandpaper to the hockey club and bring a different look than what we've been accustomed to on a consistent basis for that Leaf fourth line.
I thought the Leafs over the week were manhandled by the Blues. I thought they were manhandled by the Habs, but they ended up going 1-1 in those games, and they got to the power play, and they ended up having the power play change the game on Saturday night against Montreal. But it seems obvious to me, Nick, that despite the protests from their fan base, Kyle Dubas thinks that they can win with a team that isn't the heavy brand of hockey that we talked about out west. Like, otherwise, Gudas or McQuaid gets done, right? Like, Kyle Dubas thinks that he can get this done the way they play right now. Are you comfortable with that team, the way they play against maybe Boston?
No, not at all. But again, just speaking on the vision that Kyle Dubas has, and he's all skill. And he believes in the analytics of a player, and they believe that that skill will come to the surface, in a long playoff run. I look at it and I go once again that, he might be right if you can go 2 or 3 rounds, but you got to get past that first round. And if it's the Boston Bruins, I can't get to round 2 or 3 if I don't get through round 1.
Right.
And I just don't think that I'm comfortable enough with one style of play. And we know that the Leafs can outskill you. They can score off the rush, and they can find ways to get around you. But every once in a while in the playoffs, you got to go through a few people. And I still don't believe that the Leafs have enough of those guys in that lineup. But hey, Kyle Dubas is sticking to his plan, and we'll find out how it turns out in a few short months.
Kipper, who didn't get moved today that surprised you the most?
Well, there's so much talk about the Florida Panthers still being in play, and we heard names like Hoffman out there, Toffoli, secondary scoring. None of that really happened. But, when you're dealing with teams that are out of the playoffs, why would you even mess with anything? The time to change things up are at the draft or unrestricted free agency. In Canada, you can look at teams like the Montreal Canadiens and say nothing, Edmonton Oilers, nothing. But I'm sitting there going, listen, never before has it been so, clear that once you're kind of tied, there's really not many places that you can go, and you have to wait it out. And I'm glad that Montreal didn't do anything. They got to build up their cupboards in terms of prospects and draft picks, and it's going to take time. In Edmonton, whoever the general manager is, it's going to take time. And you got to sell that to your fans, that this thing doesn't necessarily turn overnight, but it's a process, and it's got to start with collecting assets. And you don't do that by giving them away come trade deadline day.
Kipper, after such a busy day, to give us the 5 or 10 minutes, whatever it was, we really appreciate it, man. Great job today. Let's talk again soon.
Okay, guys. Have a great night.
There's Nick Kypreos joining us as he does most Mondays
and
here
we appreciate it.
on Tim and Sid, and we appreciate it remarkably.